to go do 400-hour maintenance.
About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see the world in action, what we can be, like with no distractions. We'll get away, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out.
We are heading down to the boat, take it over to Dagmar's, get in a dry dock, do the 400-hour maintenance on the engine so that she stops beeping at me every time I turn the engine on.
It's like a wife, nag, nag, nag.
Yeah. She said that, not me. Here. All right. Anybody guess where we're going? We're going to Dagmar's. It's time to do some maintenance. It's time to cast off the lines. Let's see what the tide is doing. Right there, just past low tide, we got 2 foot and it's coming in, which is exactly what I was waiting for to head over to Dagmar's. I don't like going there to low tide or not going tide. Pretty shallow up there around the boat ramp that I figured past. And navigating upriver, trying to stay in the channel. As long as I'm in the channel, I've got 8 feet of water with me. It's about 2 foot, the tide's coming in. It's just kind of cool. You look way up in ahead, you can see those 2 orange range markers. Keep those 2 relatively lined up and it keeps you right dead center in the channel. Looks like a lot of water right there, but that's a lot of shallow water right over there. So it's really important to stay right within that channel right there. Well, we just missed it. Bridge closed on us. There's a train coming in over there. And the tide's coming in, so the river's actually going towards the bridge. So we've got the boat in reverse. Our GPS speed is 0 knots, 0.1 knot. I'm actually just hovering, which is kind of cool. Just waiting out the bridge. A little windy out today, but pretty good weather overall. And there's the train. You're gonna be here a while.
No, we're just doing our maintenance.
You guys got a slip up right now,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we like to get everything out there. Can we just throw this on? You might want to get off there, buddy.
Do what? It's been ceramic coated. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
They always do such a good job over here at Dagmar's. It was really windy coming in today. I tried 2 attempts getting in that ramp, and boy, that wind was just going to slam me into the starboard side of the boat and the dock. Here comes a boat. That must be a heavier boat because they have it backwards. Our boat's only 8,000 pounds, so they can pull it out from the bow with the engine hanging off the front. But the bigger boats, they can go up to 25,000 pounds. The heavier boats, they got to turn around like that. Everett's where we keep our boat most of the time. I do that because it's on the water, so I just grab the keys and go. I don't have to worry about the tides or anything. But Dagmar's over here is nice because I'm out of the water. They do the haul out. 10-15 minutes to get me out of the water, get me up on blocks, just like that. And then I can do whatever I need to the boat, and all the engine work done, just the routine maintenance and stuff on it. Look how shiny this thing still is, and that's ceramic coating. But the problem with Dagmar is why I don't like keeping the boat over here is there's no cover. So the sun hits it and the rain hits it. The sun will make it fade and the rain will get it dirty. But the cool thing is over here at Dagmar's is I don't have to plug in at all. I just rely on solar, and that keeps the batteries charged. All right, so we're down here at the boat, and today is 100-hour routine maintenance. We've got a little over 400 hours on the boat. So let's go over what it all is involved in 100-hour maintenance. First off, it's routine maintenance. It is super easy. Looks like a whole bunch of stuff. It really isn't. So what do we got here? Well, first off, easy thing. Change the oil, change the filter. Helps if you have the Yamaha wrench that works on that. And take a sample of the oil, send off for oil analysis. Additives to the fuel tank. So I'm going to put some fuel stabilizer and conditioner in there, and I'm going to add some ring-free. Cost-wise, between the two, they're about the same actually. The fuel stabilizer and conditioner is mixed on a 1 to 3 gallons of gas. The ring-free is a lot more expensive per bottle than the fuel stabilizer, but it's 1 to 10, right? So by the time you get done doing the math between how many gallons it treats, they're about the same. But I really like the ring-free. I do that every 100 hours at the 100-hour maintenance, and I do it again every 50 hours. I put this together. This has got my washers for the oil drain plugs, washers for the lower unit. That's actually the anodes for the thermostats. So far so good. I haven't had to change them yet. Extra cotter pins, and I also bought some extra nuts because there's 2 ways to change the oil we'll get into, and why I bought some of those extra ones. And the same thing, these little keys in here too. I'll show those when I take the engine apart. Remove the prop. So you need a cotter pin tool. This is worth its weight in gold. block of wood, keep the prop from spinning, and a little cheater bar, 27 millimeter for the nut, the prop nut. Grease gun with Yamalube marine grease. That's what it's filled with. This is for all the steering. There's like, I don't know, 5 or 6 zerk fittings, so we'll have to go and lubricate. It's really important to do this because it pushes, you replace fresh grease to push out the old grease, which pushes out seawater and stuff from it too. We're going to change the spark plugs. There's 6 of them, some anti-seize on each spark plugs. That's really easy to do. Thermostats. These are probably due about every 200 hours. I do them every 100 hours just because they're easy. And they're also super important. Lower unit, you need gear case lube HD. This is important to note. The F300 requires the HD oil for the lower unit. All other Yamahas that are less horsepower, that aren't the 4.2 liter, I should say, because the 250 and the 225 Yamaha still require the HD. But the T99 kicker, it's the non-HD oil, which is just a regular gear case lube oil used. And then you need a pump, obviously, as well. So I use the pump from, for each time. Then I've got the fuel filters to do. So I've got the primary and the secondary fuel filter to replace. And then zincs. I'm also going to be replacing all of my zincs. So my zincs actually are good. I just replaced them last October, but I'm switching to aluminum, and I'll show you why I'm doing aluminum instead of zinc that's on there right now. When we take them off, it'll be pretty apparent why I'm swapping. And then when I'm finished, Yamaha Shield, rust corrosion and protection. I spray this all over the engine, and we'll show that too. So all this just takes basic tools. You don't have to be a mechanic to do any of this work. It's pretty simple. And let's go ahead and take the engine apart, and I'll show you how we do this. All right, so I got my basic tools and stuff set up. First thing to do is pop the engine cover. Let's start with just the oil change. I like to check the oil level before I take it out. Make sure we get a good reading. One of the things I did too is after we hauled the boat out yesterday, I left the engine down because I want all the oil to level to the bottom instead of leaving it kicked up. And right there, it's between the lines, so that's good. Some of you may have heard that the Yamaha sometimes make oil where you end up having more oil in it than you put in. That extra oil is actually fuel that makes it past the piston ring, so it'll get into the oil. It's not good to have that happen. Yamaha says run it at wide open throttle for at least 15 minutes to keep that from happening. We actually run her pretty hard most of the time. I mean, I'm usually doing 5,000 RPM when I'm out cruising. I can go slower, but it just depends what we're up to. I'm going to start by just loosening it, not really tightening it. Taking off, just get a little bit loose. Now I got to pop the cowling off. So there's 2 ways you can change the oil. You can obviously pull the dipstick out and put a tube down there and pump it out. And if you have a pump to do it, you could, if that's the case, you could do that with the boat in the water. There's no way to change the lower unit with the boat in the water because the lower unit has to be vertical to re-put the oil in, and it would be underwater doing that. So I find it's easier just to pull the cowling off and drain the oil. The drain plug's about right here. So the one gotcha down here is there's two bolts back here that have to be undone. One of them has a little threaded insert that goes behind it, and it falls out most of the time. I ordered a couple extras because eventually I will lose it and need to replace it. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 of these to take out for the cowling. It's just the starboard side cowling that comes off. And I always forget there's two hidden. So in addition to the 8 bolts outside, there's 2 inside here as well. This guy right there and this guy right there, they're both Phillips up here that hold the cowling on from the top. And she comes off. Now the one thing to pay attention to is right here. It almost fell out again on me. Watch this. Right there. This guy right here. He will always fall out on you. When you put him back in, you can cover him with grease. He'll be sticky to slide him in there, but just pay attention to this, especially with the river rock on the bottom. This guy will go missing. And the drain plug's right here. This little flap to help keep the oil from running all down the engine. That's why I always loosen this before I start, so it's hand free for me to pull this off once I have the oil draining out, because it gets really messy. And again, all I'm going to do is just break it. Just want it hand tight. All right, let's get rid of the oil. Those drains, if you look, there's a gasket here on the end of the drain plug. That's got to get replaced with a new one. Never reuse that gasket. And unscrew the oil filter on the top. So that's continuing to drain. The 4.2 liter up here, they've got a little cup to help catch the oil, right, to make it easy so that it doesn't make a big mess. Wipe up all the excess, that little bit that fell out, not too much. That way you don't get a whole lot of oil down into the actual cavity of the engine. So on the new oil filter, take the plastic and stuff off of it. There's an O-ring that goes right around here, and it's dry. It's always dry. So I always just dip my finger in that oil, just put a little thin film right around it. That's all it takes. And you screw that on. Just got to be a little bit better than hand tight. Just have to help. This O-ring I have to replace. This guy, never reuse these. Here's a new one of these. Into the oil drain plug. That. And she looks like she's done. I don't use a lot of power tools when I do this. I do a lot of speed wrenches with the ratchets. It's easy to cross thread stuff, and maybe it would save a little bit of time, but if you cross thread something or break a bolt or something coming out, then because of power tools, it'll ruin your day. I prefer to do most things by feel. Right there. That's it. Drain plugs back in. My oil sample to mail off to Blackstone.
Do you do that every time?
This is the first time I'm actually doing it. I just want to establish a baseline on the engine. I've got 411 hours on the engine now. Look for that. Look for metal content. You know, is there any metal shavings or any, yeah, it's just, so right now I'm just looking to get a baseline, or if there's anything obvious that they would point out. So now to jump up top and add oil to the boat. 6.7 quarts. And the oil is added up here, pretty easy to do. And what's really nice is Dagmar's actually has a place to go dump the oil to get rid of the old oil. So changing out the oil with the fuel filter, or the oil filter rather, I should say, it's 6.7 quarts. This is the 0.7. Right there. And that's all there is to change the oil. Alright, done with the oil for right now. We got the lower unit too, we'll do that here in a few minutes. Let's go and do the spark plugs. So there's a bolt on top here to take off right on the front. This just makes getting access easier. Pull the top off. So it's got one bolt up front. Pull this off. Alright, so if we're doing the spark plugs, there's 6 of them. Just take the interference off. So you go and you pop these guys off. There's the spark plugs. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're right underneath here. So to keep foreign material from getting in there, you don't take them all off. What I do is I break everything so that I can do it all hand tight. You always want to try and prevent how often you leave holes in the engine exposed to collect dirt, dust, debris. When you pull these out, they just come straight out like that, and the spark plug's right in there. And there's the spark plug. I always look at it, make sure it doesn't look burnt off or corroded or anything like that. It actually looks pretty clean. And when I do the new spark plug, you want to put anti-seize on the threads. Very little bit. I usually just do a little dab on one side and then go up to the top. Like that's usually all I ever do. That's all it takes. And this part, really important to do this by hand. You don't want to cross thread a spark plug. And they don't get put in very tight. You want them to seal so they don't blow by, but there you go. Just feel the plate taken out of the washer. That's all there is to it. Done with that. Just do this by hand. I'll come back in, seat these when I'm done. Yeah, looks good. All the parts I use are genuine Yamaha. I don't deviate from what their specs say in the service manual. If you've not purchased a service manual, I highly recommend that you do, because it'll tell you what lubricants to use and torque settings and stuff. It also gives you a how-to. It makes it easy to determine if this is something you should do yourself or whether you should pay a shop to do it. Yep, looks good. got done with the starboard side, so we'll put this side back together. Don't forget to connect all these back up. All right, now onto the port side. There you go, all the spark plugs are changed out. All right, so I'm gonna do an inspection on this one just because I'm here. I got the tools all out. Now we look at the anodes that are inside the engine. So there's 8 sacrificial anodes that are inside the cooling jacket. 4 of them are under here. Then there's 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. To get to these 4, you have to pull the whole head gasket off and replace the gasket to get to them. To get to the 4 here, you just pull the electronic module off, and they're easy to get to. And it's a good spot check to see what the rest of them look like. Let's take a look and I'll show you what they look like. There's also 2 anodes underneath the thermostats too. But these are recommended to be replaced every 300 to 500 hours. Obviously, I checked them last time I had the boat out and they looked almost brand new. So I've got all the parts, I just waiting for them to wear out. As with anodes, you know, when they get 50% worn, that's when you're supposed to replace them. So we look here, so there's one, there's another one. If you're flushing your engine and everything good, these things should look really clean and not worn, especially if you've got well under 500 hours on the boat. I'm just gonna take the one out and inspect it because I did this 100 hours ago and they're probably still good, but I just want to show you guys what they look like. There you go. So it's got, this is the actual anode in here. You unscrew this and it'll pull out to be replaced. If you wait too long on these and they get super corroded, like they're 50% gone, they're probably gonna bond to this and you'll have to replace the housing. It's not the end of the world. It just means it's an extra part you got to go buy. It doubles the cost of it. These things aren't that expensive to begin with, and the housings are about the same cost as the anodes. But that's what they look like. There's one here, one right above it. Up here, there's one right there. There's one right here. These are the 4 to get to easily. And like I said, if you got to pull this off, pull the head gasket off, and there's one right here underneath. Looks just like this, and the same thing on the port side. So this looks pretty new to me, even though it's got 400 hours on it and a year and a half worth. Anytime you go putting the stuff back together, you always put a thin film of marine grease on it. Not on the anode itself, just that'll make the anode not work. You just want it on the O-ring. And then you just slide the O-ring back in so it doesn't get pinched. Yeah, the service manual says to inspect and replace as necessary, starting at the 300 hour mark. 300 to 500 hours when they expect them to have to be replaced. We flush the engine really good with fresh water at the end of every run, you know, when we're done with our trip. When we're out and about, we don't usually flush it if I'm at a guest marina. But certainly when I come back from a trip, I always do. And I usually run salt away through the engine as well. Alright, so that's the only one I'm going to do. So they look good. I'm going to put this all back together. And then we'll go on to the next thing. Alright, finish putting the brains back on. Alright, that's how you do the anodes. Alright, on thermostats there's two of them. One on the port side, one on the starboard. So here's the starboard side, the port side is directly across from it. The starboard side's got a zip tie you got to cut and replace. Really important you replace it. Cut the zip tie off. Get the electrical out of the way. So the thermostats, they're easy to replace. Like I said, they're due probably every 200 hours. Some folks replace as necessary. I do them every 100 hours. They're not that expensive, and it's really important to keep the engine cool. Now there is a sacrificial anode right underneath the thermostat. And I'll show you what that looks like. So, I haven't had to use them yet. This is the anode for the thermostat. It actually sits straight down behind it. To get these out, you have to take this top piece off, and then there's a gasket you'd have to replace on the thermostat housing. To replace just the thermostat, you don't need a gasket or anything. It's super easy to do. And here again, the anodes you'd only have to replace every 300 to 500 hours as necessary. You just wiggle this out of the way, and that's the thermostat. That's the old one. So what you'd look for is if this was corroded with salt, had salt crystals and everything all over it, then that would say you're not flushing the engine all that fantastically right. So this actually looks really good. I'm gonna compare the old and the new one just to show you the two. All right. This is with 100 hours on it. So I always put just a thin film of grease. A thin film of grease all over it. Just kind of clean it all up. Make sure the seating surfaces are free of debris. And then you just drop this guy right back where it came. Sticks right back in there and put the bolts back in. And then once the bolts are in, I will put the tie wrap on. The port side doesn't have the zip tie. It's just on the starboard side that needs that. When you put the bolts in, it's always good to get one going, get the threads moving, but don't tighten it, and then do the other side where you have some play to be able to make sure that they all line up. And here again, you just want them snug. Then I come back in with another tie wrap to hold the electrical cables out of the way. And here's the old one. Old one and the new one. And here I just want to get a couple of threads in. That way I still got some play. And then do the other side to get it to line up. There we go. Oh, my finger. Now this lower bolt has got an electrical connection that's kind of in the way that interferes with the ratchet. But alright, that's both thermostats done. One thing I'll point out too is there's no air filter on an outboard. Think about it, there's no dusty roads on the waterway, So the air actually comes in right here. If you're looking for air filters, you won't find one on either of the engines. All right, now onto the lower unit. This part's always messy. You gotta pop this off, which is on the other side with an Allen wrench. There. There's no way to do this and not make a mess. All right, so in the lower unit, we got to change out the oil down here. So I always like the engine, the outdrive kicked up a little bit so it'll drain to the front, because you have to, like I said, that plastic piece we pulled off exposes the drain on the bottom, and then this is the the top of the top section of it, right? So it's actually airtight inside. If it wasn't, then obviously water would get into it. So pop this off, that lets air go in, and then the oil will drain out. It's a heavy gauge oil. So like I said, remember with the 4.2 liter Yamaha, the 225, 250, and 300, it's got to be the HD. For the 99 kicker, it's the non-HD oil. Don't mix the two up. There's also a gasket on each one of these as well that has to be replaced. It's a little black plastic. And the bottom one actually has a magnet in it for metal, to catch metal shavings and stuff too. So it's always good to look at that to see, you know, there'll always be a little bit there, but hopefully not too much. And see, it doesn't want to come out because it's airtight. And I look down here, this actually doesn't look too bad. And a little bit of metal shavings there, but it's pretty light. That's about normal. Once I undo this, then it'll start draining pretty good. Once I let air in on the top, just like that. This takes a while to drain, so while I'm waiting for it, then you replace these gaskets. There's one on the top and one on the bottom. Remember the one with the magnet always, which is, if you look at the two, the short one and the long one's got the magnet. That one's always on the bottom. These metal shavings would always settle to the bottom. When this drains out, this is why I wanted it to be, you know, I didn't want to mix this with the other oil that I had in here. I want to see what it looks like coming out, and that actually looks really good. If it comes out looking really milky, then it means you've got water that's leaking into it. And there's two seals. There's a shaft seal on the top where the drive shaft comes in, and then you got the propeller shaft that comes in. That's what the gears do, is it converts it to go horizontal. If the prop seal or the drive shaft seal leak, it'll let water get into the, and that's when you have to have those seals replaced. And then we just wait, and this takes a little bit. All right, so while we're waiting on that to drain, because that always takes a while on the lower, it's really heavy oil. It just, so let's go ahead and do the zincs. So I'm going to start, I'm going to replace my tab zincs.
They're not replaced them because they need to be replaced.
No, they need to be replaced for a different reason. I just started noticing this. So we're moored at Everett, Port of Everett. It's at the mouth of the Snohomish River, so it's brackish water, but we're really close to we're more closer to the ocean than we are the river. But I do come up here to Dagmar's to do all of our maintenance, and Dagmar's has come up the river. So if I look at the anode, what I don't like on this is see how it's kind of glazed, and then there's little chips and stuff. They're not dissolving, right? When you take zinc and you put it into fresh water, the fresh water will actually coat it with a protective coating, and then they stop working. So they're not actually dissolving correctly, which means they're not really that useful. And I mean, I have different levels of salinity down there at down at Snohomish, or at the mouth of the Snohomish River. So I'm switching to going to aluminum. Aluminum works well in fresh water, and it works well in salt water. And because I'm in both, you know, especially coming up the river to get to Dagmar's, because it's going to turn to more fresh than salt water. So, but take these off. So these are the new ones. Always take a brush. It's really important to get good metal-to-metal contact with the zincs. also important to kind of scuff the surfaces up. It's going to break the surface. Alright, let's go to the other side. It's also important not to mix or match zincs on the type of them. They make them in magnesium, which is, if all you are is in freshwater, magnesium is what you'd use. If you're in salt and fresh, then aluminum is what you'd want. And if you're in just salt water, then zinc is what you probably would want. See, look at this. I just don't like the way it flakes off like that. Like this right here is really bad. See that? It should just be dissolving. And I'll say never mix and match the zincs on both at the same time. Like if I did the trim tabs as aluminum and then I did the transom anode as not aluminum, the one anode would protect the other anodes. You want the anodes protecting the boat, not one working a lot harder than the other ones. Now let's get to the transom anode while this is still draining. So this is the transom engine anode right here on the bottom. This bonding wire is really important. Make sure this gets put back, otherwise the anodes don't work. And here's the new one. Aluminum. It's really important that that grounding wire have good connectivity to the anode. Otherwise it does not work. All right, engine anode is done. And finally, the oil has stopped draining. My two plugs I gotta get ready with new gaskets. Don't want to lose these. And here I gotta get the engine level. Right there. So the pump is actually required to do this. If you just got your boat and you're getting ready to do the 20-hour maintenance, partsview.com has a kit for 20-hour maintenance that comes with the pump. And then you just keep the pump because you use it for every 100 hours thereafter. So it's got a straw, slides in there. And it's got this little adapter. Pump some fresh oil through it to get out whatever was left in the line from before. And then this has to screw in. You just got to get it where it's just in like that. And then you just start pumping it, and it puts the oil in and it starts rising it, and we're waiting for it to come out the top hole. And it will use almost 2 of these. It always uses the first quart and then a good part of the second quart. There's no fast way to do this. Now we're on the second quart, so it should come out the top here any second now. There it is. That's why I keep the big tub under, because it always makes a mess when it does this. So the way to do this is you start with the top one, because you want to capture that in there. Remember, it's airtight, right? So just getting some out. Tighten this on to make it airtight, and when I pull the bottom one out as quick as I can, there won't be a lot of stuff that'll want to come out because it's airtight, but I want to get the bottom plug in as quick as possible. And the hard part is this oil. There's no way to not get the oil all over the out drive when you do this. And if you put it in the water, you'll see a sheen of oil behind the boat. We don't want that, especially in Puget Sound. So I wipe it all up, but this is not good enough. I will have to come over across this with some soap and some water, which is the last thing I do, to wash all this off. Really important to get all that oil off of it. Like I said, you always use a full quart. It's a little bit out of the second quart. You always have to have 2 quarts to do it. Now to put this doodad back. It's a Allen, that size. Probably what, maybe 1/8 of an inch. I'm sure it's metric, whatever the equivalent is. Can't do this job without taking this piece off. Lower unit oil has been changed. But wait, there's more. Alright, so the next thing we do is grease all the zerk fittings on the steering. Really important to do. So these zerk fittings, you've got one right here that goes up when the column comes out of there. There's one right here, there's one right there, there's one on the other side. I think there's one more stuck over there. So you have to position the engine in different ways to get to all of them, and you also need a grease gun that's got a fairly flexible tip and stuff to do this. And all you're doing, you're putting a handful of grease until you see it come out the other side, like right up there. You watch, right up in there. See the water coming out? That's why we do this. That water will get in there and it'll corrode that whole bearing and stuff, and then that'll lead to more money. We'll put fresh grease in there to displace the old grease and push out any water and contaminants. The other thing is to make sure your zerk fittings are clean before you connect up to them. You don't want to push any contaminants into the zerk fitting. of the kicker one here too. Kicker's only got the one down here, so I should clean that guy off. You see the water coming out on the top right there. That's why we do this. Push all that water out. So here's what you gotta do, a little bit of engine yoga. Position the engine however you need to get to these last 3 zerk fittings, 1, 2, and 3. Got one. Now to clean up, because I got all this grease and now drips on the bottom, to go wipe all that up, because I don't want that going into the ocean. I'm just going to wipe all the excess up. You got primary fuel filter. Has to go in here. So if you look on the bottom of this, there's a wire. The wire goes to a quick disconnect. So disconnect that. That's because you're going to have to twist it, and you don't want to twist the wire. So it's got this protective cage it's got to take off. The interference out of the way. Stop on my tools. Now with this, I like to be ready to go quick. Sometimes it'll leak some fuel out. And it goes in one way. There's a rubber gasket on the one, not on the bottom, so make sure you put it back in the same way it came out. Stick a rag in case any spills. And just like that. This is gasoline. Just put the new one right in. That's it, and then we run the wire back underneath. And make sure you reconnect it. And that's the primary fuel filter. This goes on hand tight. Alright, and that's how you do the fuel filter, the primary fuel filter on the engine. And now it's time to put the covers back on and button her up. It's not windy out, so I'm going to spray this Yama Shield Rust and Corrosion Protection Waterproof Lubricant. Remember, this top one's only got one bolt up front. Huh? I gotta check the oil. Just want to be between the two holes right there. That looks good. All right, now to put the cowling back on. Remember, when we put this back on, it's got these two that are up in here. So you want to. And then also you have this wire up here to watch out for. There, and I got one right there. Put these back together, I always put a little bit of blue Loctite on it. Keep them from vibrating out. And you just get them in a couple of threads so they all grab before you tighten everything down. Make sure they all can align. And remember, we had this guy right here. He likes to fall out. So this guy has to fit right in the back. There's actually two of them. One of them here, one of them here, but he always wants to fall out. So the easiest way is put some grease on it, or you slide it back in there. Grease will act as like a glue to temporarily hold it. Alright, I have them all threaded. Now I have to go out and tighten them all. Just Put a little drop of Loctite on them. Tell you some other tips too. So inside here, I bought a couple extras because I like to drop it. Then one day I'll probably lose it. And I also bought, these are the same bolts that go here. They're starting to get corroded with salt and stuff like that, as we expected. So I figured eventually when I pull them out, I'll have to replace them just for the corrosion. When I do my ordering is I go in and I'm doing the maintenance right now. As soon as I'm done, I'll update my logbooks and everything with all the work that I did. Then I will immediately turn around and I will go place an order for all the parts that I used today, because I won't need the parts until I run another 100 hours. By then the parts will show up. That way if there's any back order issue, whatever, I got plenty of time. Alright, so I got that one. And you always want to pull this to make sure that this hits it so it's not pinched, that it has plenty of movement. And since while we're here, one other thing too is these trim pistons. Clean the tips of them off really good. Right here, and then the little button underneath that they rest on. Clean that all off, get all the dirt and debris and everything off of that, and then re-grease them. This is really important. Actually, one of our earlier videos, the engine didn't want to go down, and this is what the actual cause was these tips. What'll happen is this, when it seats up on here, they'll bind, and if there's no grease, then the mating surface can be such that they're stuck, and then as you try and go down, then it tries to bend the rod down, and that'll prevent it from actually lowering on you. So it's really important to keep these things clean and greased. Doesn't take a whole lot. That. And the secondary filter, one of my future upgrades on the list is to take this, pull this out and put like a 1/2 inch piece of starboard just to kick this out like a 1/2 inch so it's easier to get the bucket underneath. I never put these on really tight, but they always come off really tight. And depending on the temperature, I've actually had it spew gas and keep spewing gas. That's why I always have a bucket here to catch it. And it's a fuel filter, so it's also catching water. So I don't want any of this in my bilge, because this is gas. And always have a chem wipe handy too. I've had it where it keeps spewing all gas out of here. That's why the bucket is really handy. Don't just use rags. You don't smell the fumes? And I only ever put this on hand tight. That's it. Nothing in the bilge. Alright, so we just finished the maintenance. Big recap was oil change, oil filter change, primary and secondary fuel pump or fuel filters changed, both thermostats replaced, all 6 spark plugs replaced, lower gear unit oil replaced, lubricated all the steering zerks, and replaced the trim tabs and the engine zinc with we replaced them and put aluminum on there, but and we checked the internal one of the internal zincs just to show where they're at, but mine are really good. We use our boat an awful lot. We flush after every trip. So when we go out, if we're going guest dock to guest dock, we don't flush the engine there. If we're gone 4 or 5 days a week. But every time we come back to the dock in our home slip, we always flush the engine for a good 5-10 minutes and run salt away through it too. So why do your own maintenance, right? First off, it's routine maintenance. As you guys can see, it's not hard. Anybody could really do it. Just basic tools and stuff is all it takes. It's routine maintenance. It's not complicated stuff. You don't have to be a Yamaha tech to do it. It doesn't void your warranty, right? Not doing the maintenance would void your warranty. Either you do it or you pay a Yamaha tech to do it. It saves a ton of money, and more importantly, it saves time. I'd have to go add up what all the parts cost me, but I'd guess like $200-300 at the most is what the parts cost. I buy them at PartsView, so I get a discount at partsview.com. I order the parts as soon as I'm done with the maintenance. As soon as I get home tonight, I'll go online, I'll reorder the 100-hour parts kit from them, which comes with most of the stuff I need, and then I'll add the thermostats. I always do those extra. And then it'll take a couple weeks for it to ship. If there's supply chain issues, whatever, they'll show up before my next 100-hour maintenance. So that way I always have one set ahead waiting to do. The big thing for us is it's time savings. If I had to schedule with a shop, that's the big detraction. Well, there's Bayside, there's Tom and Jerry's.
But you have to pay for the haul out.
Yeah, anywhere you go, the boat's got to come out of the water, right? So there's a haul out you're going to have to do. And each shop handles that differently because you can't do the lower unit with the boat in the water, right? I didn't do I didn't pull the lower unit off for the impeller. I did that 100 hours ago, and I can easily go 200 hours between as much as we run the boat. The specs say to check it every 100 hours, but it's an inspect. Replace it if it's worn, but usually you can get at least 200 hours on an impeller. It depends. If the boat sits for a long time, then the impeller will kind of take its shape, and that'd be a reason to do it on a more annual basis. But here and again, the lower unit, if it's one of our other videos, I took the whole thing apart and showed that. We can link that in the description below with the link to that. But the key thing is just getting time with the shop, put it on the schedule. They're going to be weeks or months in advance to get you scheduled on that, and then is that going to line up with when your 100? If you wait till your 100 hours is needed, then you book your appointment, you're going to be another month or two wait. So it's just inconvenient on the timing. And like I said, it's really no different than changing oil in your car or spark plugs in your car. It really is that simple.
And if you had your boat always on a trailer, definitely do it yourself.
Yeah, it's no excuse if you've got a trailer. Absolutely no excuse if you have a trailer because it's in your driveway, just hanging out. So yeah, that's why I do it.
It would be paying for a haul out, having a shop do it, paying all their labor costs, or we pay for a slip here at Dagmar's, bring it over, put it on blocks.
Yeah, I want to say it's probably $1,000-1,200 job roughly if you pay somebody to do the 100-hour maintenance. I do it myself for under $300 in an afternoon worth of work. We have to have the haul out. We use Dagmar's for our haul out, so I pay for a spot here at Dagmar's. But as long as I'm at Dagmar's 4 times a year, which is easy for us to do, because I'll do the 100-hour maintenance at least twice every year, sometimes 3 times in a year, depending how much we're using the boat. So it makes it affordable. And then on top of that, with Dagmar's, no appointment needed. I just drive the boat up, forklift comes, they have me on blocks in 10 minutes. So that's a huge advantage to me. It's just the time, so it's around my schedule, not a shop schedule. And like I said, it's not hard. You guys can see what it takes to do. It's just, at 500 hours, that's my next maintenance interval. I will have to take the boat up to a Yamaha dealer. I'll take it up to Tom and Jerry's. There's a couple things in the service manual. The fuel pump needs to be inspected and tested. I don't have the tools and stuff for that. And looking at the service manual, probably a little bit above the do-it-yourselfer. Like I said, I'm not a Yamaha tech, so the more advanced stuff in the service manual I'll have the Yamaha dealer do. So
if it requires special tools, why go buy the tools?
Right, tools and knowledge. And sometimes, you know, there's a couple other anodes that are inside the engine. There's one I know in the oil pan, and then there's one other, I forget where they put it, but both of them in the service manual call it out as, you know, take it to the Yamaha dealer. So 500 hours, that's where she's going to go. I'll do this. I'll do everything I just did today. I will do for the 500 hours, and I'll just have Tom and Jerry's do the hard stuff. That's specific at 500 hours.
So would you say that doing it yourself keeps you a little extra money in your pocket?
A lot of extras. It's another tank of gas. Even at today's gas prices, the money I saved today, you know, will fill that gas tank up. Actually, speaking of which, I need to put the fuel treatment in. I haven't done that yet. That's just pouring the ring free and the fuel stabilizer in the gas tank. So, and then fill my logbook out with all the work that I did and annotate the hours, and then clear the computer on board. So last thing, clear out the annoying alerts. Optional maintenance required. Click OK. Let's clear out that or the warning message. Go to vessel. Go to Yamaha. Go to options. Go to information. Maintenance reminder. And you have 100, 50, 300, and 400. So I need to reset the 100. So that's what I did. And I'm going to reset the 50 because at 50 hours I replace the fuel filter that's inside next to the batteries. I'm going to reset that one also. And the 300 hours I'm still counting on because that was 107 hours ago. 400 hours I'm just getting right now. But surely that should be a 500 hour. Reset the 400. And then I also got to do it over here. Otherwise this beeps as well. So reset. Maintenance. Down here and say reset. Reset current hours. Set equals yes. And just like that, now my warning should be cleared.
Good. Again, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications so you get notified when I upload a new video. And until the next video, stay tuned for more channel surfing.